Hey everybody, it's the Crypto-Anarchist here, and I'm bringing you guys another video on cryptocurrencies. In today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Streisand effect and the problem with the censorship that the Bitcoin SegWit or Bitcoin Core community, whatever you want to call it, I like to call it Bitcoin SegWit because that's the part of the coin I don't like. A lot of people like to call it Bitcoin Core after the development team, but anyways, there's been a lot of censorship that the Bitcoin or the BTC community has been going through, and they think it's helping them out, but it's not, and it's actually just making them completely unaware of what's been going on in the cryptocurrency space. And some points I want to make on this are about, like, obviously the price of Bitcoin Cash, it's recently kind of exploded, and a lot of people are saying, it's happening for no reason. Well, it's actually happening for very specific reasons. So let's go ahead and talk about those. The first reason, and this is one of the biggest reasons, this is one of the things that the BTC community says is completely impossible, which is probably one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, but is the what you call zero confirmation transactions. I like to call them verified. You can call them verified. You can call them anything. Zero confirmation just is sort of confusing in what it means. A verified confirmation is a confirmation that will not be reversed, or an irreversible transaction. Okay, so you can do irreversible transactions in Bitcoin Cash within 500 milliseconds. This is what Dedelnix, the Omri Sechet, he's the lead developer of Bitcoin ABC. It's the most used Bitcoin node software in Bitcoin Cash. But he says you can do it in 500 milliseconds. Craig Wright has been saying you can do it in 20 milliseconds, and a lot of people have been making fun of Craig Wright for this claim because it's supposedly faster than the speed of light, but technically speaking, Craig Wright is correct on his claim that for certain transactions where the purchaser has no control over over the exact time of the purchase, they can't do a double spend transaction, or they can't predict it from across the earth. So the attacker is just as limited by the speed of the signal as the honest, or not the attacker, but the attack transaction is just as limited by the speed of light as the honest transaction. But anyways, so for Craig Wright is saying that you can actually do it in 20 milliseconds for certain transactions. So all transactions should be able to do zero confirmation in less than 500 milliseconds, where the only way to reverse this transaction would be a Hal Finney attack or a complete 51% attack. So obviously there's still some risk for these irreversible transactions, but you can do most all irreversible transactions in 500 milliseconds, and for certain irreversible transactions you can do it in under you could do it in under 50 milliseconds. So that's incredible. The BTC people have no idea about this because they've been censoring everything about it and saying it's impossible, but all you have to do is do the math, and the math works out. Next thing I want to talk about is something that Craig Wright released, and even within the BCH Bitcoin community, a lot of people have been shunning Craig Wright, and there's reasons for this. He's a cunt, but he's a real smart cunt. So I mean, I'm not saying you should like the guy. I'm saying you should probably listen to him, though. So let's talk about what Craig Wright has released. He's released this software development kit. Oh, actually, this right here that we're talking... No, yeah, this is a software development kit, sorry. This is the software development kit where he has a shared key generation scheme where basically you can share private keys amongst people so that in order to open something you need all parts of the key. And so it almost reminds me of a sort of a ring signature scheme, but instead of for privacy, this is for security. So you can have your coin stored at an exchange, but if a hacker gets access to all the private keys of that exchange, in the past the hacker would have all the coins, but now using this shared key generator, if an attacker gets the keys of the exchange, the attacker doesn't have anything yet. The attacker has to get all the other parts of the keys. So it's basically it's a huge security thing, and as if this is like if this gets fully fleshed out and gets brought into software that exchanges use, it's still like beta stage right now. Mt. Gox can never happen again to the BCH Bitcoin community, and that's an insane thing to say. How many different cryptocurrencies have suffered hacks or different things like that at exchanges recently? You know, you can talk about all the old ones, Mt. Gox, Cryptsy. There's been the recent ones like BitGrail. You know, um, I would assume it would stop things like the parity sort of hack that happened to Ethereum, because if they had shared keys, the person who's, I don't know exactly, the parity hack was weird because the person sort of just deleted access to the coins for everybody. But if you had a shared key sort of software implementation like Craig Wright has released with Nakasendo, that could have been impossible. So this is a huge thing. This is like an absolutely massive thing. The next thing that I want to talk about is another N-chain release. This one's a patent. We talked about this in my last video. It's the licensing system on Bitcoin Cash. So it's basically just a way to utilize smart contracts to basically tell different distributors of digital assets which digital assets you have the rights to have access to. So like, let's say YouTube sells different subscriptions. They have YouTube Red where you can pay to get different YouTube videos. So YouTube might just have two, I don't know exactly how it works in this setup. This is still, like, this was just patented, so it hasn't been fully released yet. But anyways, YouTube might just have two different wallet addresses, one for regular users and one for people who are or use YouTube Red, or maybe it just has one wallet address just for the YouTube Red people. And so if you've paid into that YouTube Red wallet address, like, your account has a Bitcoin Cash wallet address to it, and it just checks to see have you paid, you know, your subscription or not. And then if you have, then it gives you access to those digital files, and it's all done through a blockchain. And so it's all done on an immutable ledger. So like, you can always say, hey, I have access to this at this point. The blockchain says this. So, you know, even if YouTube had some sort of bug or hack in their system where they, for some reason, there was something wrong with your account, you can always just say, point to the blockchain and say, hey, I have paid my bill, but I'm not getting these certain features. What's going on? And you can use that just to, like, you know, prove what's going, or, you know, prove where the error is. It's really helpful to prove where bugs are. A blockchain is. That's what it's really useful for. All the information is just right there on the blockchain, and everyone knows that nobody can have nobody could have altered that information that is stored there. So this is really big. And as a writer, as someone who tries to create a bunch of like sci-fi fantasy stories and stuff, and different, you know, board games and stuff to sell with that, this is huge for somebody like me. I know it won't make a lot of sense to people who don't really use something like this, but just think of how many digital artists there are, or people who create digital assets. And by that I just mean like musicians, filmmakers, things like that, people who do that sort of work and don't get paid. This is just a way for them to do it and get paid in a better and smarter way. So it's just making use of a lot of unspent work, and actually hopefully getting some productive activity out of all those artists in society, rather than them then they're only being like 1% of artists actually being utilized for their talents. But anyways, the next thing that I want to talk about is T-Chain. Now, T-Chain is the Bitcoin Cash version of Lightning. Now, when I talk about this, a lot of people they're going to sort of cringe at the idea, and that's sort of a good thing, because there is sort of one thing to worry about with T-Chain. As of right now, T-Chain, it's a very good product. As far as I know, I'll have to read into it a little bit more, but it seems to be a version of Lightning that solves all the issues that the SegWit version of Lightning brings up. And so T-Chain, I'm just going to refer to it as Bitcoin Thunder, but what Bitcoin Thunder does is, instead of instead of sharing channels like what I've said before with the SegWit version of Lightning, SegWit, basically you put money in a channel, and your channel is shared between you and other people, and your money can move back and forth. There's a great video actually on this. Let me bring up this picture here. There's a great visualization of this by a guy named Decentralized Thought. The payment channels on the SegWit version of the Lightning Network, it's basically like an abacus, and your money is either on your side of the channel or it's on the other side of the channel. And the problem with this is that if it's on the other side of the channel, it might not be available to be used. So you'll have money in your account, but you won't be able to use it. And again, this is why I keep telling you guys recognize this as a version of fractional reserves, because what the SegWit version of Lightning does is you're loaning out your liquidity to somebody else, even though like they say you keep your money, but you're loaning out your liquidity. And it's the same thing they did with gold, where they would say, they're going to fractional reserve everything. They'd be like, we're going to loan out your gold, but you get to keep the money on your account. It's just sometimes when there's a bank run, you can't use it. There is the congestion problem, which is a bank run with the SegWit version of Lightning, but that's not what we're talking about in this video. But anyways, this is the problem with the SegWit version of Lightning, is that you loan out your liquidity, but your liquidity is your money, so you're actually loaning out your money by using the SegWit version of Lightning, and that's what makes it a fractional reserve system. And just like in fractional reserves, the banks loan out your money. In the SegWit version of Lightning, the Lightning nodes loan out your money, and sometimes you can't use your money, and that's the problem. Well, T-Chain solves this because basically the way that it's supposed to do is that for every payment that you make, you're supposed to open a channel and therefore pay a fee to miners. So like if I pay Bob, then I have to open a channel to Bob. If I pay Alice, I have to open a channel to Alice. I can't I can't use or route my money through other people's channels and therefore not have to open a new channel if no channel already exists. That's the main issue that is with the SegWit version of Lightning. And the reason why I say you have to be careful with Bitcoin Thunder and the way that Bitcoin Thunder works is because there is this part in this article here where it says among new upgrades that they're working on is the ability to direct payments to parties that aren't directly linked via an existing channel. Okay, you cannot share channels in a second layer payment system on top of the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. You can't share channels. There has to be one fee paid to the miners for everything that you add onto the blockchain. And by that, I just mean like if you're going to pay Alice and you want to do it through T-Chain, you need to open a channel with her. Now, I'm not saying you can't do something outside of T-Chain where you say, oh, hey, like maybe Alice and Bob in real life, and you each owe each other money, and so you just figure it out, and then you send each other money through T-Chain, and then you don't actually open a new channel. You can do that, that's fine, but you have to remember that at each level, each level has to only serve one distinct purpose, because if you start sharing channels, again, you run into the problem that you did before where you have a fractional reserve system. You can have the thing that fractional reserve people get correct is that sometimes people use their liquidity incorrectly, but that doesn't mean that you need to take their liquidity from them. That just means that if people want to avoid fees, like the whole point of T-Chain and the whole point of like if you were to do transactions outside of T-Chain itself to make it so that you can make payments to people through T-Chain without having to open a new channel. The whole point of that is just using your liquidity intelligently. But again, you can't steal people's liquidity. If you share people's channels and you take their money in the same way that the SegWit version of Lightning does, again, which makes the network an abacus where sometimes you have your money, like your money is still in your channel, but you might not have access to it. You can never do that. You can never force that upon the user. And I know I might not have said that in the best way here in that description, but the whole point is that you can never share people's money in a channel like this where they can have money in a channel but not have access to their money. Okay, if people want to do some sort of liquidity tricks or accounting tricks to make it so they pay less fees on their own, they can do that. That's the whole point of T-Chain. That's another thing that I want to talk to you guys about T-Chain or Thunder, Bitcoin Thunder, which is again the Bitcoin Cash version of Lightning, is if you use this is a trusted setup, because now you're not trusting the blockchain for your transactions, you're trusting the hardware from Intel. And technically speaking, like I've read the white paper on this, this seems to be a very good idea, and it would be useful for things like the Internet of Things or high frequency traders. There's a very small number of people who would use T-Chain or Bitcoin Thunder, but the people who would use Bitcoin Thunder would get a huge amount of use out of it. So T-Chain and Bitcoin Thunder, like the one thing I don't like the way Emin Gunsurer sells it is he sells it as a scaling solution. It's not necessarily a scaling solution. It's technically speaking a way to avoid fees. That's really what it is. The side effect is that it will help scaling. It'll offload a lot of transactions that you don't really want on the blockchain, because you got to remember, you don't want all transactions on the blockchain, but sometimes you want like every like once a day transaction of a series of linked transactions to clear on the blockchain. There are certain scenarios where that's where you want. Okay, the thing to remember is just that for every payment that you make, there needs to be a channel opened on the blockchain. Okay, you can't share people's money in the way that Bitcoin SegWit does. And I'm going to make an entire new video on the fractional reserves there, because that video by Decentralized Thought and that image right there is perfect, and it perfectly explains the fractional reserves of the SegWit Lightning Network. People just haven't really got around to understanding what exactly that is, because it's kind of a complex topic. So honestly, most people don't want to talk about it because they're just afraid to. But the final thing that I want to talk about is that even Charlie Lee has admitted that the Lightning, the SegWit version of Lightning on Bitcoin, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. There's no way that it can work. And Charlie Lee says if you try and set it up or the way that they're trying to set it up, that you will have bank runs that could last up to 3 years. Now he says this indirectly, but you have to do the math to figure it out. But let's look at his quote. This was in his where he talked about Lightning and SegWit and Litecoins, his view or his vision for the future of Litecoin with SegWit and Lightning. And he talked about how with 1 megabyte transaction or blocks, Lightning on Bitcoin can service 500 million users. Now, I don't know where he got this, because this is the most retarded calculations I've ever seen. So with SegWit, you can get about 7 transactions per second. There's about 600 seconds in a block, so it's about 4,000 transactions per block, right? So, and every day you get about 144 blocks. There's 4,000 transactions a block. 144 times 4,000 is 576,000 transactions a day. Okay, 576,000 transactions a day on chain at 1 megabyte blocks. Now, Charlie Lee says you can do 500 million users on Lightning nodes. Okay, 500 million users on Lightning nodes. Now, the calculations, if you're assuming that the Lightning Network is decentralized, which is what they're saying it's going to be, I'm assuming that they're going to go back on that and make it hub and spoke. But if the Lightning Network is decentralized, you need about 14 channels open in order to have a good chance of being able to route to most everybody on the network. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of people who you won't be able to connect to. But if you have 14, there's a good chance you'll be able to connect to them. So 500 million users times 14 transaction or channels open, that's 7 billion channels. Now, here's the problem. The problem is the congestion problem. We talked about this before, and this goes into how Lightning is a fractional reserve system. And I said again, I'm going to make a full video on this in case you didn't fully understand it when I made it here, because I'm only going over it in a short time period here. But the problem is that 7 billion channels, if there's some sort of issue, like let's say the price of Bitcoin drops dramatically, or maybe everyone just wants to get off Bitcoin for the next cryptocurrency and they try to close out all their Lightning channels, there's 7 billion channels to close out, right? And we just said you can only do 576,000 transactions a day. So you can close out 576,000 transactions a day, and there's 7 billion channels. Okay, so that's going to take you literally 10,000 days. That's like 30 years. It's literally like 30 years to close out all those channels. I might have done that math wrong. You can check me real quick, but 30 years? Are you kidding me? And I think it's actually a little bit more. So if there's some sort of huge problem in the Bitcoin community and the price starts to tank and everyone tries to get their money out, you can't get your money out. You might die before you can get your money out. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Okay, this is a bank run on steroids, you know. I don't know. It's that doesn't even do it justice. Like the fractional reserves of the SegWit Lightning Network that they're trying to force upon the network is so stupid. Like at least a bank run in the modern era, you lose all your money, but you know you can get back started again eventually. You know, but like this is just like, oh, your money's just stuck for 30 years. It's just stuck. I mean, it's just stupid. It's really just stupid. But anyways, for those of you who are being brainwashed by the BTC SegWit or BTC Core team, you really got to start watching the actual news that's going on in cryptocurrencies, because it's been really bad for Bitcoin BTC and it's been really good for Bitcoin BCH. I'm going to put my donation address for Bitcoin Cash below. I'm not asking you guys to donate a lot. I'm just saying, like, throw me a couple quarters and dimes if you've watched a lot of these videos. Like, I don't know, if you get near to watching like 10 hours, think about paying me a quarter. I think that's a pretty fair deal. And I'm not necessarily doing it to make a lot of money. I think that if you do donations, the Bitcoin Cash it'll rise up in value a lot later on. So a quarter now might be, $2.50 later. So that might actually be a good donation. But the one thing that I actually want to get bumped up is the transaction count on Bitcoin Cash. We got to bump those numbers up, guys. We got to spread adoption. The only way you do it is actually paying people on it. People don't want to get involved in Bitcoin Cash if they have to, if there's not use of it. When you start spreading use of it, you have to start using it yourself. And again, I'm not trying to be like, hey, give me hundreds of dollars in donations. Send me a couple of dimes and nickels and quarters. Give me your dimes, nickels, and quarters. Just a couple. Only if you've watched a lot of these videos, because I put a lot of work into these. Obviously, I enjoy doing it, so I'm going to keep doing it either way. But it would be very nice to actually receive some donations. I don't think I've ever received a donation yet. The second thing I want to say is, if you do decide to give a donation, make sure it's a very small donation for your first one, because I think the address that I'm going to put down there, I don't think I've ever actually received any Bitcoin Cash on that address, and I'm always a little cautious before I receive Bitcoin Cash on address once, just because, it's just like I want to make sure it works. I want to make sure everything I downloaded works correctly. But anyways, yeah, donation address below. It'd be nice to receive a couple nickels and dimes. Don't send a lot, because I've never received Bitcoin Cash on that address before. But anyways, there will be more videos coming out soon.